Welcome back. So before we get started, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everybody who's gone and contributed to the GoFundMe campaign that Justin over there in Australia set up. The response has just been, nothing short of overwhelming. So yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody who managed to contribute to that, and we hit the goals that Justin had set up on there. And so given that there's enough funds there now for me to complete the changes that I need to make on the airplane there to get it ready for Justin and Elliot to come back, and then also to get caught up on everything I'm behind on right now, and then bring them back out again and cover all the expenses needed that are going to be incurred in that during the testing phase. I'm going to actually close down that the campaign in the middle of the week. So if you had wanted to contribute there, I'll leave a link in the bottom of this video so you get a chance just if you wanted to be part of it. And if not, then that's fine as well. And I will be closing it up probably on Wednesday, I think, is when I'm going to do that. So anyway, once again, thanks so much for everybody who's contributed on that. It's just taken away one aspect of something I have to worry about for the rest of this project until the prototype's flying. So moving on, and one other thing I wanted to just cover with you briefly was there have been a lot of people in the last video, last couple of videos, saying that they were suggesting that I use these linear bearings for running on the side sticks. So this is the side stick there. The linear bearings you can get actually like a sleeve that has ball bearings inside the sleeve that run on this, and they would sort of be a low friction setup. And I've seen ones that they have online that you can get that have a flange built onto the end of them, so it'd be a bearing like, or a sleeve like that with a flange on the end. And I could have potentially bolted that onto the existing bracket that's on either side there inside of the fuselage. The problem is the bracket that's closest to where the elevator linkage connects up, I couldn't put that bearing on the front side of that because there's not enough room there between where the elevator linkage is to allow one of these things, because they're quite long. They're about 2.5 inches long, compared to the little iGlide that I had before, which was nothing really. And I had tried longer iGlides as well, and they didn't really make a difference. But anyway, back to the linear bearing. I couldn't fit it on the front side, and if I tried to put it on the back side, in between the two brackets of that the main bracket inside of the fuselage there, then I wouldn't have had a space for where this guy goes. So I would have had this linear bearing somewhere here, 2 inches here, and this part here wouldn't have had anywhere to go. I would have had to move this down here, and then that would have meant that the alignment of the connecting rod there for the center stick would have been out of alignment, and that would have created some differences in the geometry which may not have been acceptable. And even if I had gone with the linear bearings and made that work, the other problem I had was still the small bearings that were in these slots in here. So I had these 10mm bearings in there, and the problem with those are being so small and such a small contact area and such a small bearing that's rotating in there, is when you load it up with all that side force that you have on the stick there, it was just too much riding on that one tiny little area there, top and bottom still, but just a tiny little area there, and that was causing friction as well in the whole setup. So just two different problems there that were just difficult to try and solve. So anyway, that's why I've decided to go the path that I'm going right now with with using the square tube. So, and I bought this square tube here just to do some experiments and stuff with, and this is just the cheapy stuff from Home Depot, and it turns out this is a 6063 T5 spec on here, and I've only this is only like 16th wall, and I managed to source online the 6061 T6, which is actually twice as strong in terms of the flexing strength here as what this stuff is. And I'm getting it with a double thick wall, so it should be 4 times as strong as what this is. And so that should give me a good solution. I'll show you in a minute how I did some tests on this just to see how much this flexes compared to the original side stick that I showed you just now. So anyway, so that's why I didn't use the linear bearings there with the the little ball bearings inside that inside the tube there, because everybody was sort of saying, oh let's use that, But anyway, that's why I didn't do that. So let me get on and show you. I've made a lot of progress already, even since 2 days ago on the design. I'm getting close to having things sort of sorted out with that. But anyway, let's get into that and I'll show you where I'm at. So first up, this is the existing rod there, and I've got it sort of suspended so I can flex like the last 8 inches of it, and I'm pushing down, with probably half of my weight on there on this one, just to see how much it flexes in the last 8 inches. And this is just a comparison to see how the aluminum's going to go. Alright, so this is pushing about the same amount of force, and then ultimately I put all of my weight on there to see if it would actually hold the bend, but it returns. And as I said, this one here is about 1/4 of the strength of what I will be using. Okay, let's take a look at the progress that I made over the last couple of days. So obviously I've been working on this quite a lot to try and get it done, because this is really the big thing right now that's holding up getting the prototype flying. Okay, so what I've done since you last looked at it, first the major change here right away was I've changed out how this tube was here. I don't have that join anymore, so what I did was I sort of moved it a bit further away from this guy, and that allowed the clearance so it doesn't interfere with the bracket sticking out here. And so I didn't have to have that extension on there anymore, so I got a solid piece. And the next thing I did was, as I mentioned earlier, I've gone and changed all these tubes now. They were 1/16 inch wall, and now they're 1/8 inch wall, because I managed to source some of that online. And as I said, that's going to pretty much double the strength of these tubes, and especially compared to that one I just showed you, the one from Home Depot, which is 6063 T5. That strength on that one, the yield strength, is only half of what this would be in the same material, but now I'm doubling the thickness. This should be 4 times what I showed you on that video with it flexing there. So that'll be good. And as you see, I've done it all these places where I'm using the same tube everywhere. And then the next thing I did was I switched this around here. So these little tabs here, those will be welded onto here, and with a bolt hole through there. And then of course that's welded here to these guys. So this sort of main piece here all sort of slides into place and captures the bearing that's in here. That little bearing in there, that's the bearing. And then once that's in place, you take this guy and you slide it back this way and capture that bearing, and then you put the bolts in place with some washers and lock nuts on there. So now you've got that main piece in place, and then all the other pieces sort of come with it. They're already bolted on. All this stuff is already bolted on. And then lastly, you can slide the tube in, from the dash there, and there'll be a way there to hook up the linkage there for the elevator. Alright, so the next thing I did was I've added in the arms here for the connection to the aileron tube, the aileron rod that connects over to the main stick that runs through the keel and actuates the ailerons. So those are there, and I still haven't decided exactly how I'm going to finish this out here. I'd prefer to keep this all one piece and sort of cut out the square shape out of these, which is a little bit tricky to do that. And then they'd slide over the ends there, and then Britt could weld them on for me. And I'll probably leave this sticking out a little bit here so he has a nice area to weld up to. And the other way to do it is to basically cut this off at the end here, and then sort of butt weld that on there, but then he won't be able to weld on the outside. So I think it's safer to take the effort to sort of cut this and allow it to come through. And then the next thing I've done was, as you can probably see here, I've added a second set of wheels here, these guys. So now it's encapsulated in both directions. The downside of doing this is that I've also gone and added in the adjustment bolts here. So like this guy here, that guy there pushes up against this bolt, so ultimately the hole for this one going through this piece here would be slotted in the vertical direction here. So you could crank some tension on this, and there'll be a lock nut on here too. Right now I just don't have that, but you can crank some tension on here which would push this guy up, which ultimately would put more pressure on the wheel to push against the square tube there. But once you go and do that, you've now moved the whole square tube potentially up a little bit. If it does move at all, it depends on how tight the tolerances are here. And if it does move, then this guy, if it moves up, then this guy might be out of alignment. and then there's no real easy way of adjusting this other than putting a spacer in here, like just putting a little thin washer in there or something. So, but if you only want to adjust it sort of 10 thou, you'd have to get a bunch of 10 thou spacers, and it'd just be a lot of messing around. So we'll see what happens in that. We may not need these if this is all strong enough here. And if you look at that square tube that I showed you there, the edges on that are very, very sharp because it's extruded aluminum. They're not rounded off like the steel. So even though these wheels don't have a lot of white width on the faces there, it's you've got as much contact area as you can here because the edges are so sharp. And this is exactly the same dimensions of square tube that Cirrus is using, and I'm pretty sure I've got exactly the same dimensions of wheel as what they're using as well. So it works for them. It should work on this setup. I did try and see if I could find online some wheels that didn't have this sort of chamfer on this one edge, that they would just basically open up all the way, and this flat face here would have met all the way back down here. But I haven't been able to find any that look like they're machined nicely or whatever, with bearings and everything in them already that have that kind of spec. So anyway, that remains to be seen, but yeah, we'll be obviously seeing how this goes. But having the option with all the weldments already done to mount this second set of wheels here means that I don't have to go back and pull stuff out and add something on. It will already be there, and if I don't use it, it's no big deal. That sort of extension will just sit there and do nothing. Likewise down here, the same thing. I've added these here, and I've got the adjustment screws in here. Actually, it looks like I've got to remove something after I made a change here. That one's not in the right spot. But yeah, that's an adjustment screw, and so this is an adjustment screw. So you do have well, let's say this one here. So this bolt here is for adjusting this one here, so you can make that tighter, and then that bolt under there is for adjusting this bolt here, in other words, to move that wheel tighter. So I have it on both axes, but we'll see whether or not we need to have the both axes there. Alright, so the next thing was what I did was I've added in just a little corner of what the air conditioning unit is, and now it's not on this side, but it's on the other side. But anyway, it's the same type of thing because everything's mirrored. That basically represents that corner of the AC unit there. It pretty much touches this bracket there, and that's about how deep it hangs down there. So I had to make sure everything clears around there, and given that we're swinging through a total of 90 degrees, so 45 degrees left here, 45 degrees right, we just got to make sure nothing hits that. So I ended up having to move this wheel one here down a little bit, but it's not a big deal because you see where we aim. If the stick is over here, and you're putting all your force here, and you've got one roller point here and one roller point here, and then the the aileron rod is here, where the thing is, it's fairly evenly matched in between where the loads are being picked up. And given that I'm using this thicker tube now, even for this guy, those loads that are picked up down here with these wheels will transfer nicely into those bearings there, and there shouldn't be any real movement in here other than the rotation that we're expecting. So anyway, you see when this guy rotates, it's going to be clear of the AC there, and the only thing I have to be mindful of here is this guy. When that comes up 45 degrees, I've got to make sure it doesn't hit there, and I'll show you in a minute. It looks like it's going to hit there, but the existing one that's on the aircraft has the same profile on here, and it doesn't hit there right now in the aircraft. So maybe my estimation of where this is a little bit oversized, but it's easy enough if I have to that I could just notch a little bit out of here if it's going to interfere with this guy after the fact. So that's that part. And then let's see, the other thing I haven't done yet is I haven't gone and done anything with the end of the stick yet itself. So I've got the old stick in there. That's what that looks like. And ultimately what I'm going to have to do here is this square tube here. Ultimately I need to transition it from square tube back to round tube because the side stick actually sits in the round tube here, sort of bolts into it. So probably what I'll end up doing is round about here somewhere, I'll put a larger round aluminum sleeve over this and have Brit welded on, and then transition here, and then transition again like I have on the existing one. And then still be in all aluminum, but it'll be thicker OD on there to match the inner diameter that I need in order to slide the actual stick handle itself into the tube at the top there. So that's something I still have to do there with that. But then let me show you again exactly sort of how the motions are. Oh, and then I've got one other thing I wanted to show you as well here in a second. Alright, so let me hide that stick again first, and let me show you what's going on in here. So I've got a little bit of issue here, as you can see down in here. This guy is basically popping out through that little sidewall there of the lower dash panel. And so what I might end up having to do is move this and sort of weld it up to this guy, and then maybe create like another one of these coming off of here to sort of support it. So it sort of come out there like a T, and that way sort of most of the bulk of it can be on the top here, and then on the bottom I can just use one of these thinner brackets there across there, and there's very little chance it'll interfere then. And in the real world this thing isn't as thick as it is here. It's only very, very thin. It's probably only about 30 thou thick or something like that, whereas here I've got it almost a 1/4 inch thick, I think. So you know, it's got something I'm going to have to be aware of just to make sure that that doesn't hit there going forward. And as I said, I can just reorient those bolts around the other way if I need to, so I don't have that sticking out there. So not a big deal. And as I said, I got the adjuster bolts on there. That guy needs to be fixed because it's not in the right spot. But let me show you what it looks like when we go through some of the motions. You know, we spin it through the 45 degrees and in either direction to see how it works. Okay, so what I've determined already, just based upon some interference that you're going to see in a second here, that I'm probably going to have the center position just being 5 degrees sort of anti-clockwise from where it is right now. Whereas right now it's sort of vertical on this guy. So let's show you what happens when you take it through 40 degrees to the left here. So I'll just sort of line this up here so I can see what's going on. And so I'm using that guy there as sort of my reference for what level is. So taking it 45 degrees this way. So that's about 45 there, and we come back about 5 degrees there, about there, and we'll see how we look for clearance. So over the whole AC unit there, obviously nothing's touching that. You can see everything's clear there. Under here, we're just getting to the point here where we're touching, and if need be, you know, I can clearance some of that bracket if it gets in the way. Nothing else in here is touching there. As it rotates around, that all stays clear, and I've checked it all to make sure when it rotates it doesn't hit. None of this stuff here hits on that bracket there. But down the back here we start to see that we're potentially going to have problems here. See, this is actually touching here, and as I said, that particular side panel there isn't as thick as what it is, so probably it'll end up just touching it, and then that'll be it, you know, where the stop is. And if I change that stuff around there, we won't have this sticking out here. So overall I think I'm pretty good. I can get 40 degrees going back that way. So that means I need to get 50 degrees going in the other direction without having anything hit. So if we go back here again and I take it through back to neutral, the old neutral is there, and the new neutral is going to be 5 degrees of that, so about there, and then I want to come another 45 degrees, so that would be, there's 40 degrees is there, or 45 from the old neutral, and add another 5 degrees to that, and be about there. So we look back down there, everything's good here, nothing's touching, and I've checked it as it goes through the motions, nothing actually touches as it's rotating around like that. All the other stuff is good there, nothing to worry about there, nothing to worry about here, that's all clear. And there's not touching there, but underneath here, the AC unit, we just start to see this guy touching there. So you know, maybe I'm sort of just going a bit too much, maybe I went more than 50 degrees or whatever, but it's one of those things I'm just going to have to try it out a little bit more and just double check all my measurements for where the AC unit is. And then this bracket here, the existing bracket that's in there right now doesn't hit on there, so I'll be adjusting this thing to match that. because it's the same, it's going to be the same dimensions as the existing one. So I know the existing one doesn't hit, so when I get this one just in the right clock position there, it won't hit as well. And then of course the linkage there to the ailerons will be correct the way it's supposed to be. So overall, looking pretty good for that. And then obviously, you know, the stick just slides in and out there as it needs to be, and I've got to hook up the elevator linkage there because that's different than what I currently have, because I have a round tube right now and I need to hook it up to a square tube, so that's another job that I still have to do. Alright, so obviously I've still got some things to do here to get finished off, and I'll be working on that over the next couple of days to make sure that I get it all dialed in as best I can. I don't want to have to, you know, redo anything once I get this all finalized and start fabricating. So if you guys see anything that you think that I've overlooked, or you've got some suggestions to how I could improve this here just to make it a little bit better, I read all your comments, so please, you know, drop a comment in on the video there so I can see what your suggestions and or comments are, and hopefully I can get this thing dialed in the first time around and make it work as smoothly as I have it pictured here and also in my head. Anyway, that's going to be this video. I'll have another update early in the week to show you where I'm at with that. And thanks again once more for everybody who contributed to the GoFundMe. That's really just taken a lot of pressure off me, and I really appreciate it. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next one.